Delaware-Lackawanna train DL3 eases into Taylor Yard as it does on an almost daily basis. It just cleared the junction of CP 672, which is one of the hottest railroad junctions in NEPA. Control Point 672 is one of 4 railroad junctions in northeastern Pennsylvania that take the heaviest per tonnage pounding on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. It's probably no surprise that these 4 junctions are all located along the main line of the Class 1 railroad, Norfolk Southern. In 2 previous videos, we talked about railroad junctions and control points and the importance that they play in day-to-day railroad operational safety. I'll leave a link to those videos in the description box just in case you missed them. We begin part 3 of that video series at CP 672 on the Scranton side of Taylor Yard. Taylor Yard is the starting point of this channel and the ground zero of railroad operations in NEPA. Indeed, as surely as all roads lead to Rome, all railroads in northeastern Pennsylvania lead to Taylor Yard. Theoretically, of course. 3 of the 4 railroads that serve the region do business here. The short line railroad Delaware-Lackawanna to the north, the regional railroad Reading and Northern to the south, and the Class 1 Norfolk Southern Railway, which brings everybody together. The 4th railroad in the area is the Luzerne and Susquehanna short line located in Pittston. Now owned and operated by the R.J. Corman Holding Company, in past years, the L&S occasionally made trips up the Sunbury line and to Avoca to work the petrogas propane plant there, although these occurrences were very, very rare.
Yeah, they do. They have a car sitting there. Dropped it off Thursday night, I think.
Besides being the northbound entrance to the Taylor Yard proper, 672 was also a common meeting place for trains such as the K82 and the 37T that you see passing by each other here. Norfolk Southern primarily uses a signaling system called ABS. That's automatic block signaling. Locomotive engine heat, when left uncontrolled, can damage engine parts and shorten the life of the engine and its attached components. An effective radiator system keeps the engine and components at the optimum operating temperature, regardless of whether the locomotive is operating in mountains or flatlands or hot or cold. A locomotive radiator system primarily cools air, water, and oil. The air is used in the locomotive combustion process, the water for cooling the engine and turbo if it's equipped with one, and the oil for lubricating the engine components. The radiator system is intended to keep the engine operating at nearly the same temperature regardless of the ambient air outside of the locomotive. This allows maximum horsepower to be available at all times and extends the life of the engine and its lubricants. Electromotive diesel and General Electric differ in radiator system designs. EMD uses a wet radiator system in which fluid is cycled through the radiator system constantly while the engine is operating. GE, on the other hand, employs a dry system where fluids are routed through the radiator system only as conditions warrant. Each builder uses a system of valves to route fluids to banks of radiators to achieve the level of cooling needed at any given time. While both builders use fans on the main radiator banks to assist in cooling, EMD's system also uses a shutter system to control the flow of air across the radiators. Modern EMD and GE locomotives use a split cooling system with separate paths to reduce the coolant temperature to the levels required. In split cooling on a GE locomotive, a majority of the fluid cooled in the radiator is sent back to the locomotive at one temperature, while a portion of the coolant is routed through additional radiator banks called subcoolers or aftercoolers for further temperature reductions. Once passed through these additional cooling banks, the fluids travel to various devices, such as the air-to-water intercooler, to assist in cooling the engine intake air. The combustion air is first drawn in and compressed in the turbocharger. Compression heats the air and must be cooled before being used for combustion. Cooler air is denser and is more oxygen-rich, making it a preferred manifold air temperature for increasing horsepower, controlling emissions, and reducing fuel consumption. After passing through the intercooler, the intake air passes through a heat exchanger where additional cooling occurs if conditions warrant before going to the engine for combustion. Another path from the subcoolers is to the oil cooler prior to the coolant returning it to the engine. Lubricating oil absorbs heat while inside the engine, and it needs to be cooled before returning. Subjecting lubricating oil to high heat shortens the life of the oil and would force more frequent oil changes to maintain the engine in good working order. Higher temperatures lower the viscosity, that's the thickness of the oil, which increases the wear of internal components. EMD uses a slightly different layout, with two separate loops from the engine, one for the radiator and oil cooler and another for the aftercooler. Various connections between the two loops allow the onboard computer to utilize excess cooling capacity in the aftercooler loop if needed. The vast majority of locomotives on the road today utilize simple tap water for coolant in their radiator systems. Water is much more efficient at transferring heat than a mix of water and antifreeze that's typically found in your car's radiator system. Benefits of using water allow the overall size of the radiator system to be smaller due to its higher efficiency, the lower cost of water compared to an antifreeze water mixture, and water's ubiquity. Any garden or water hose that can reach a locomotive can add fluid to the radiator system in a pinch. There are also environmental concerns with using antifreeze since the water system needs to be drained occasionally for maintenance. To keep the radiator system in top shape, a corrosion inhibitor is added to the water. This additive protects the system from developing rust, corrosion, and scaling. The reason for giving you that little speech on locomotive cooling systems is also the reason why the train 11Z that you see stopped here is looking at that yellow approach signal. On the Taylor side of the Taylor yard is a disabled train 14R. This train has some kind of cooling issue that disabled the lead unit. That's where that little speech comes in. If you remember what I told you, plain old tap water is used in locomotive radiators, and any garden or water hose that can reach a locomotive can add fluid to a radiator system in a pinch. If you look closely under the lead engine, you can see the engineer with the hose adding water to the locomotive. The history for railroad signaling is as colorful as any other. Because our country was so huge compared to most in the 1800s, and every little railroad had their own idea as to what they should do and how they would do it, we had a huge variety of signals in the United States. Fortunately, a few styles won out and became standardized fairly quickly. Semaphore signals appeared in an unusually large variety, as there were upper quadrant, lower quadrant, mechanically operated, air operated, electrically operated, and so on. Also, in the early days, let's not forget that green, yellow, and red was not always the standard. When colors were first assigned to signals, white was used for clear and green was used for approach or slow. Obviously, if a lens was busted out, you could see the problem with using white for clear. And in addition, purple was used in many places for the stop indication, but usually only in dwarf signals. Today, lunar white is often used in the standard 3-color color light signal, making them a 4-aspect signal, following the green, yellow, lunar white, red progression, where many locations have added this restricting indication. CSX seems to be using this a lot, as the old color position light signals use lunar white for the reverse 45 position for restrict. After the semaphore signals became a plethora of signal types, example given, color lights, searchlights, position lights, and color position lights. Color light signals were made by everyone. They could be vertical, as most railroads employed, or horizontal, as the C&W did. They could have any number of aspects on one head, although 3 was the norm. In a typical interlocking arrangement, 3 color heads would be mounted on top of one another. A variation of the color light signal was the GRS Type G signal, where the 3 lenses were arranged in a triangular format with red on the bottom and usually green to the right of the 2 on top. This signal is also called a tri-light signal by many, although CNS people call them color lights. You may be called to task for using the term tri-light because the purists will tell you that they are all tri-lights. Not true. And besides, a USNS Type G signal is a color position light.
Yeah, I would tag it hot engine and just let your dispatcher know and see if they can get you another unit or something, brother. Yeah, we have no idea where I am. Okay, thank you very much for your help. Alrighty, hope y'all have a better rest of your evening there, over. Roger, you too. Knock out.
I talked before about the Scranton and Taylor sides of the yard. That's because the north end is in Scranton and the south end is in Taylor. Here at the Scranton-Taylor line, a southbound train 11Z gets authority to proceed further south.
Morning.
How are you today?
Okay, this will be number 3925 to the TNE NS 4300 South SOUTH. At Taylor. Number 2, box 2 is a proceed with CP699. That's 699 to CP714. 714 on main MAIN track. 925, 1 box only. Number 2, dispatcher RKH.
3925, just the TNE 4300 south of CUTH at Taylor, 1 box check, box 2, proceed from CP699, 699 to CP714 on main MAIN track. Track authority 3925, 1 box check, box 2, Capapino, dispatch RKH, over.
3925, that's 3925, 1 box only. Number 2, copy Papino. It's okay at 1207 p.m.
3925, 1 box checkbox 2, copy by Pino. Okay at 1207, 1207 p.m. Dispatcher RKH, over.
Very much. We're good on it.
Anthracite Auto, a fancy name for scrapyard, sees occasional rail service from Norfolk Southern. Rail operations here are sporadic and hard to catch. AIMX is the reporting mark of the American Iron and Metal Corporation. American Iron and Metal is a family-owned, Canada-based company founded in 1936 in Montreal, Quebec. Recognized as one of North America's most sophisticated metal recyclers and specializing in the recovery and recycling of scrap metal byproducts, AIM has evolved into a successful and multifaceted company with a global footprint which includes more than 24 facilities in Canada, New England, El Paso, Miami, Scandinavia, even Poland. Another Amex car that's been showing up after a seemingly long hiatus are these beige high-side bathtub-style gondolas. I don't know what they're being used for in 2020, but in the days of the Canadian Pacific Sunbury subdivision, these cars carried construction and demolition debris from the North Jersey and New York City metro region to places unknown for disposal. Another steel hauling gondola that's common in the railroad business of today are those of the Schnitzer Steel Industry reporting mark SSEX. Like AIM, SSI has over 24 locations all over North America. The new AIM gondola cars, and just for the record, they are called gondolas, not gondolas. There are no gondolas on American railroads. The only gondolas I know of are in Venice. Now, where was I? Okay. In the tradition of the Amex cars are the older, but similar, EMEX cars. EAMX is a reporting mark for the Everest Railcar Services Company, a railcar leasing company based in Bentonville, Arkansas, which is also the home base of the giant Walmart Corporation. And although EMEX gondolas are a common sight in the region, the ones that always stood out to me were those that were leased to the Sullivan Scrap Metal Company out of Holyoke, Massachusetts. With 3 locations in Holyoke and Worcester, it's rare in this day and age to see such a conspicuous corporate identity on the sides of modern-day rail cars. But as Sullivan states on their website, the term family business is not taken lightly. Another reason for seeking out the Sullivan Scrappers was the rare pink breast cancer awareness card number 5017. The pristine Pretty in Pink scrap gun was captured by Philip Turner in Grand Rapids, Michigan on March 1st, 2010, just months before our previous CP Train 257 rolled through town. And to show you how fast things can change, we caught up with the 5017 5 years later in 2015. No longer clean and tidy, no longer working for Sullivan Scrap, the faded outcast was spending its days moving metal for the Metrobec Corporation, which is yet another scrap metal company that's based out of Montreal, Canada. In video T168, we took a detailed look at some of the small fleets of rare pink freight cars that are shuffling around North America today. We talked about the pink rolling stock of the TTX Corporation, Halliburton, and Hub Group. There's a link to that video in the description box and in the pinned comment, just in case you missed it. On March 26th of this year, northbound train 14R had a brand new spick-and-span TTX boxcar that was wrapped in a shiny pink shell. TTX is bringing awareness to millions of people with its pink boxcar project, and the Hub Group Container Company is doing the same with their Cause Container campaign. Later in the summer, I caught something that I've been hoping to catch for a long time. An authentic pink Clem Co-op grain hopper. And in the spirit of this incredibly rare catch, here's some info on Iowa grain co-ops. The oldest active cooperative elevator in the United States is in Marcus, Iowa, a small town with just over 1,000 people. Formed in 1887, the cooperative's goal was to provide farmers a place to competitively sell their grain. At the time, elevators were mostly privately owned, with operators able to pay low prices to producers for harvested grain while making fantastic profits when the grain reached market. Farmers from that part of the state gathered to collectively start their own elevator by the railroad, providing an alternative for the sale of grain. And thus began an era of cooperative agriculture that exists to this day. Co-ops have been important to the development of agriculture in the United States, and in Iowa maybe even more so. I don't think you can understate the importance of their role in the growth of agriculture in Iowa. Co-ops operate differently than just strict profit maximization. They service the rural areas where investor-owned firms might not decide to have assets where no competition exists. These co-ops grew up in the state to fill a need for producers to gain access to missing goods and services. Cooperatives maintain assets in rural areas that investor-owned firms wouldn't. In many cases, they are the reason we still have local services like banks in these rural areas. The co-ops also help ensure that rural services are maintained in the areas their members live. There were a number of co-ops that had their own cars in very visible colors like pink or bright green or bright red. It had to be fun to watch these colorful cars in the various freight and grain trains. Nowadays, we look for different trailers or containers in a variety of colors, and for those interested in nostalgia, the elevator tracks at the Clem elevator were ripped up years ago, but the Iowa Northern now operates the line between Belmont and Forest City, and Union Pacific still serves the elevator at Fordhamville, or at least it did in 2018. On a later day, Monday, November 9 to be exact, I caught the Halliburton Company's number 7995 while perched on the Green Ridge Street overpass. My timing could not have been better, as it was less than 5 minutes after I snapped these photos that the DL train moved south and into town and onto the Norfolk Southern for the 1-mile reverse ride down to Taylor Yard. From there, it was scattered to the wind. The 7995 is one of a small group of 2-bay covered hoppers owned by Halliburton that are painted pink in honor of breast cancer awareness and research. It falls into the ranks of those in the 7900 and 8000 number series and marks the third one that I've caught in the region. The first one being the 7996, which I caught in June 2015 on the Canadian Pacific Train 458. CP 672 is the hottest railroad junction in northeastern Pennsylvania because everything that you'd expect to find at a control point, you can find here. We've got it all. Signals, dwarf signals, signal bungalows, signal relay boxes, dispatcher control switches, switch heaters with a propane tank, automatic equipment identifiers, positive train control, and a milepost. The dwarf signal located here is hard to see, but on an overcast day such as today, you can see it illuminated clearly through the trees. Positive train control, commonly called PTC, is one of the main reasons that so many older locomotives on Norfolk Southern were retired back in 2020. We'll talk about all 9 of these control point characteristics in their own videos in the not-too-distant future. In January 1973, a connection was made between the Lehigh Valley and the Delaware and Hudson in DuPont, Pennsylvania. The connection, called DuPont Junction, allowed for a seamless routing of traffic such as symbol freights NE84 and NE87 between the two roads that largely eliminated the need for an interchange point. Prior to the construction of DuPont Junction, NE84 would come down from Mountaintop on trackage rights over the C&J backtrack through Ashley and onto Lehigh Valley trackage at Franklin Junction. Franklin Junction was often a bottleneck where freights would wait for permission to travel through Wilkes-Barre so power and crews could be exchanged with the D&H at their yard. Conversely, NE87 would wait for permission to enter Wilkes-Barre Yard from the north to exchange crews and motive power. The construction of DuPont Junction eliminated these bottlenecks and provided the impetus for both roads to enter run-through agreements sharing motive power and crews. Hurricane Agnes and the resulting flood of June of 1972 caused a great deal of damage to the rail yards in downtown Wilkes-Barre. The C&J had already pulled out of Pennsylvania entirely and much of the area was slated for redevelopment. As such, there was no need for the D&H to maintain a presence in the middle of Wilkes-Barre, especially since Hudson Yard was less than 5 miles away and could handle any local business. The D&H and Lehigh Valley trains that ran through DuPont Junction often used a matched set of Alco C628s and a Northeastern style caboose. After C-Day in 1976, the D&H continued to use the Lehigh line for run-through trains all the way through the takeovers of the D&H by Guilford in the 1980s and Canadian Pacific in 1991, as well as the buyout of the Lehigh line entirely from Conrail by the Reading and Northern in the mid-1990s. The Canadian Pacific continued to run through trains over the now R&N Lehigh line until September of 2015, when CP sold the D&H South lines to the Norfolk Southern and exited Pennsylvania. Norfolk Southern ran through trains 36T and 37T over the Lehigh line to its own Lehigh line until 2020. We're back on the Taylor side of Taylor at Minooka Junction, located near CP 673. Trains that need to enter the Taylor yard can do so at CP 672, as we saw earlier, or through CP 673, as this train 37T meeting its sister train 36T are doing on a hot summer July morning back in 2016.
NA stop signal CP 673, south siding.
CNH M1A 8151er.
M1A.
Hey there, we will box 1 at 9027 with no switches 714 to 699 if you're ready to copy a new one over. Check 309195 9195 to the TNE NS 8920 8920 South SOUTH at Taylor. Checkbox 2, proceed from CP 679 679 to CP 697 697 on main track. Check 39195, 1 box 2, over.
While trains like the 36T and 37T would occasionally meet in Taylor, what made Taylor Yard something of an unofficial division point on the line before the River Line came to be in 2019, the Binghamton, New York to Northumberland trains 10A and 11A would usually meet at Taylor Yard. The A team, as I called them, began running over the Sunbury line in April of 2016 and did so for almost 2 years up to 2018. After that, their symbols went south as unit auto rack trains between Alabama and Georgia.
August 16-16-2015, 2015, 2015. CDNS Southwest Southern, 9744, 9744 South, SOUTH. At milepost 675, 675. Check line 2, TWO, proceed from CPS 679, 679. 2 CP case on main track. Track warrant 1313 has total lines check 1, line numbers 2, HSS, over.
We're back at CP 672 as Canadian Pacific Train 458 with its usual Norfolk Southern power takes the siding for welded rail train symbol number 931. Yes, this is indeed the same welded rail train that you saw a few videos back in Steel Spaghetti. This concludes part 3 of the video series Junctions and Control Points. In part 4, we'll look at the 5th hottest railroad junction in northeastern Pennsylvania, milepost 671, better known to us rail fans as the Steamtown Y.